Hollywood coroner says an overdose of narcotics, police say possibly heroin, is
Very nice to see you, my little songbird. That sultry greeting might sound sweet on the surface, but beneath it lingered a volatile tension. That was Beautiful Dreamer, wasn't it? Jim Morrison slurred, his words laced with liquor and arrogance. And Janis Joplin? She wasn't having it. Their first encounter wasn't a warm embrace of two musical giants meeting in mutual respect. It was a powder keg of bad behavior, unchecked egos, and raw, explosive chemistry. Behind the glamour of stage lights and roaring fans, a bitter feud simmered between two of rock's most electrifying voices. The truth, however, was far darker than anyone ever imagined. Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison, two names that still echo through the halls of rock history. To fans of the late 60s, they were gods of the counterculture, flames that burned too hot and died too young. Both left this world at just 27, inducted into the infamous 27 Club. On paper, they seemed like soul twins, wild, fearless, and unapologetically free. But peel back the myth, and you'll find something messy, eh? Because if you had asked Janis how she felt about being compared to Jim Morrison, she'd probably roll her eyes and scoff. The truth? She despised him. Their relationship was less musical harmony, more barroom brawl. Picture a world soaked in whiskey, lined with smoky club walls, and pulsing with deafening feedback from a guitar amp turned to 11. In that chaotic whirlwind, Jim's behavior wasn't just reckless, it was repulsive. Several friends recounted the times Janis had to teach him a hard lesson with her favorite weapon, a bottle of Southern Comfort. One of the most infamous incidents happened at a glitzy Los Angeles party hosted by music producer Paul Rothchild. His bright idea? Invite Janis and Jim under one roof and hope for artistic sparks. Instead, it was emotional grenades. Morrison, already notorious for being out of control, didn't tone it down that night. He wasn't interested in talking shop. He wanted to make a scene, and Janis was his target. When his advances turned sleazy, Janis asked Rothchild to take her home. But Jim wouldn't back off. Like a drunken villain in a western, he stumbled after them, trying to pull Janis out of the car by her hair. That was the final straw. In one swift motion, Janis turned, bottle in hand, and cracked it against Jim's head. Her Southern Comfort wasn't just for drinking, it was a declaration. Don't ever touch me again. Jim didn't get the message. He kept trying to see her. Rothchild had to intervene and tell him, gently but firmly, that Janis never wanted to be in the same room with him again. But that wasn't their only clash. Another night, another city, another fight. This time it was New York City. The place, a smoky, electric club called The Scene, jammed wall-to-wall with legends. Jimi Hendrix, the McCoys, and a sea of strobe lights and cigarette haze. Morrison, as usual, was drunk and desperate to be the center of attention. While Hendrix mesmerized the crowd with his guitar sorcery, Jim staggered around, making a fool of himself. From the back of the room, Janis watched. Furious. Fueled by frustration and a drink or two, she stormed toward him, bottle in one hand, cocktail in the other. She smashed the glass over his head and dumped her drink on him for good measure. Then came chaos. The scene exploded into a surreal storm of flailing limbs, flying feathers, shattered glass, and tangled guitars. It wasn't just a fight, it was a musical meltdown. And at the center of it, Janis and Jim, locked in a messy, legendary brawl that would echo in rock folklore for decades. In the end, all three icons, Janis, Jim, and Jimmy, met tragic fates. Gone too soon, leaving behind whispers and half-truths. Were these stories embellished? Maybe. But one thing is undeniable. Janis Joplin didn't just dislike Jim Morrison, she loathed him. His sleazy, drunken antics repulsed her. And when he crossed the line, she made sure he paid the price, with glass and fire in her eyes. But there was more to Janis than just broken bottles and backroom brawls. Her fury didn't come from nowhere. It came from scars, some of them carved deep into her soul long before she ever set foot on stage. From the very beginning, Janis Joplin was a girl on fire. While other Southern girls swooned over Elvis or smiled to Patsy Cline, Janice was drowning herself in the pain and truth of Bessie Smith and Lead Belly. She didn't want sugar-coated love songs. She wanted soul. She wanted truth. And it came at a cost. Port Arthur, Texas was not kind to girls like Janice. Her acne, her weight, her deep voice, and tomboy clothes made her a walking target. She wasn't just different. She was punished for it. The teasing was relentless. She walked through school hallways like a soldier, through enemy lines. Her crime? Being bold. Being brave. Being herself. Even worse, Janice dared to speak out against racism in a town still clinging to segregation. For that, she didn't just get sneers, she got scars. College didn't save her. At Lamar State and then at the University of Texas in Austin, she hoped to find acceptance. Instead, she found cruelty dressed in sophistication. People laughed at her, judged her, whispered about the barefoot girl with the baggy shirts and the raw, aching voice. The cruelest cut of all? A fraternity voted her ugliest man on campus. It was the kind of cruelty designed to break someone. But Janice didn't break. She screamed. She screamed through every lyric, every wail, every soul-shaking performance. Her pain became power. Her rejection became rhythm. Her heartbreak became the howl of a generation. Janis Joplin wasn't just a singer. She was a force of nature. And if you crossed her like Jim Morrison did, you'd feel the full force of the storm. She didn't just sing the blues. She was the blues. When Janis Joplin stepped on stage, she didn't just perform, she bled. Her voice was rough, raw, and alive with a defiant ache that couldn't be taught. It could tremble, cry, scream, and soar. She sang like someone who had been knocked to the ground again and again, but refused to stay there. Her voice wasn't polished, and her performances weren't flawless, but that's exactly what made them unforgettable. Janis didn't chase perfection. She chased truth. And for every misfit and outcast who ever felt silenced, her music became a war cry. I matter. I'm here. You won't erase me. Fans connected with her because she wore her pain openly, without apology. Each note was a wound. Every song a confession. Janis didn't just sing the blues, she embodied it. Her music was rebellion in its purest form, a rallying cry for the unheard. But behind the strength of her voice, the pain that fueled her never really left. It clung to her, haunting the corners of her soul. Her escape had a name, Southern Comfort. As the years rolled on, the sting of rejection never dulled. And when the music wasn't enough to drown the ache, Janis turned to something else. Southern Comfort. At first, it was just a drink. Warm. Familiar. A little sweet. But over time, it became more than that. It became her ritual, her shield, her escape. Whether she was commanding the stage at Woodstock or crooning in a dimly lit bar, that iconic bottle of Southern Comfort was never far from her grasp. It was her companion, her courage, her silent confessor. With oversized rose-tinted glasses perched on her nose and bohemian silk flowing around her, Janis would clutch the bottle like a second microphone. She drank with the same fearless intensity she gave to everything else in her life. Loudly, boldly, unapologetically. Ironically, Southern Comfort itself was misunderstood, just like Janis. While most assumed it was whiskey, it was actually a sweet, flavored spirit. But Janis didn't care about the label. To her, it was liquid bravery. The brand took notice of their most rebellious, unpaid ambassador and sent her a lavish gift, a full-length lynx fur coat with a matching hat. And Janis wore it like armor. For a woman who often struggled with her self-worth, that coat became more than just a fashion statement. It was validation. But the comfort came with a cost. The same drink that steadied her before every performance also blurred the lines between strength and surrender. Her relationship with alcohol wasn't just part of her stage act. It was woven deep into the fabric of her private torment. When the world got too cruel, Southern Comfort was her way of pushing it away. But the more she drank, the heavier her sadness became. In the end, the bottle she clung to for strength helped drag her down. Was love ever real for Janis Joplin? To the outside world, Janice was the wild queen of counterculture, a fierce, untamed spirit who lived and loved without limits. But inside, she was aching for something tender, something real. Behind the glitter and grit was a woman who wanted what so many of us want: love. Not fame, not worship just to be seen. Her relationships were intense, chaotic, and heartbreakingly short. Each one flared up like a match, brilliant for a moment, then gone, leaving only ash and regret. She gave everything to her lovers with the same reckless passion she gave to her songs. But time and again, she ended up with empty arms. Some partners were dazzled by her star power, but couldn't handle the emotional fire that came with it. Others never cared for her at all, just the fame, the thrill, the legend. Perhaps the most haunting encounter of all came in 1968 at New York's infamous Chelsea Hotel. Janice had been hoping to meet Chris Christopherson that night, but instead, she crossed paths with Leonard Cohen. For Cohen, it was just another passing moment, immortalized later in his song Chelsea, Hotel Number 2. But for Janice, it was something else entirely. A moment that stayed with her. A moment that hurt. Cohen would later admit that while the night was just a lyric to him, it might have meant something far more personal to Janice. Time after time, her heart was broken, not just by lovers, but by the world that never seemed to love her back the way she deserved. These wounds bled into her music. Piece of my heart, Cry Baby, Maybe, they weren't just songs. They were confessions. Every note dripped with longing, loss, and a desperate hope that love could someday be real. The ache behind the anthem. Janis Joplin didn't just make music, she made truth. Her voice carried the weight of a woman who had been beaten down by the world and dared to sing anyway. But behind the screams and soul came a haunting silence, one that Southern comfort couldn't numb, that fleeting love couldn't fill. She gave us her everything. Her heart, her pain, her joy, her fury. And in doing so, she became something more than a star. She became a symbol, a voice for every lonely soul aching to be heard. But the price of that honesty? It was steep. And in the end, the girl who sang like fire would be extinguished far too soon. But her echo remains loud, defiant, and unforgettable. Her voice was raw, rough, and full of emotion. It could tremble, cry, or even scream. Janis Joplin sang with the fire of someone who had been kicked down again and again, but refused to stay there. She didn't just sing the blues, she became the blues. Janis's music wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. And that's exactly why it cut so deep. It was raw, honest, unfiltered. That's why so many outsiders, people who never quite fit in, felt an instant connection to her. Every time she sang, it was her way of shouting, I matter. I'm here. You can't silence me. Her songs still speak to people who feel the same. Because Janis Joplin's entire career was one long, defiant act of rebellion. Every note she hit, every scream from her throat, it was a battle cry. A battle cry against those who tried to erase her worth. But even as music gave her strength, the pain of rejection never fully left her. To ease that ache, she turned to something else. Southern comfort. At first, it was just a drink, a warm friend, a way to calm the nerves before stepping into the spotlight. But Southern comfort quickly became something deeper for Janis. It became a part of her image. With her oversized rose-tinted glasses, wild bohemian clothes, and gravelly voice that could make hearts shatter, Janis would often step on stage with a bottle in her hand, like it was another microphone. Whether she was singing to thousands at Woodstock or in some dim, smoky bar, it was always there. She drank with the same boldness that she lived her life. Loud, fearless, and without apology. Southern comfort, like Janis herself, was misunderstood. People, even Janis, thought it was whiskey. But for most of its history, it was really a sweet, flavored spirit, closer to vodka than bourbon. But it didn't matter what it was made of. For Janis, it was liquid courage. Fans noticed. So did the brand. She never got paid for it, but Janis became Southern Comfort's most iconic, rebellious spokesperson. As a thank you, The company sent her a lavish gift, a full-length lynx fur coat with a matching hat. For Janice, who had always struggled to feel beautiful, that coat was more than a gift. It was armor. She wore it with fierce pride. Yet, like so much in her life, it had a double meaning. The drink that gave her strength also blurred the lines between confidence and escape. Her relationship with alcohol wasn't just a stage act. It was tightly woven with her inner battles, her insecurities, her old scars, and the crushing pressures of fame. When she felt she wasn't good enough, the drink numbed the hurt. When the world seemed cold, it warmed her soul. But with every glass, the weight of her troubles grew heavier. The very thing that once gave her courage also played a part in her downfall. But before we talk about how it ended, we need to talk about love. Because Janis Joplin, for all her wild spirit, just wanted to be loved. Even though the world saw her as a queen of counterculture, her love life told a different story. A sad one. A stormy one. A story full of heartbreak. She gave everything to her romances, just like she gave everything to her songs. Fierce. Unfiltered. But every time she ended up alone. Some partners were dazzled by her talent, but couldn't handle her intensity. Others were only interested in her fame. One of the most unforgettable moments happened in 1968 at the Chelsea Hotel in New York. Janis had been looking for Chris Christopherson, but instead, she found Leonard Cohen. For Cohen, it was just a fleeting moment, later turned into a song. But for Janis, it was heavier, deeper. She was weighed down by loneliness. Once again, she was looking for love, and found only a reflection of how unseen she really was. These heartbreaks didn't just hurt her. They haunted her, and they poured straight into her music. Songs like Piece of My Heart, Cry Baby, and Maybe were raw confessions, filled with the aching sadness of a woman who had given everything and been left empty. Vulnerability became Janis's signature. That's what made people connect with her. In every scream, you could hear fragile hope, bitter rejection, the quiet ache of someone who wanted so badly to be loved and never truly believed she deserved it. Behind the fur coats, the loud music, and the wild performances, she was still just that Texas girl, dreaming of being accepted. Fame didn't fix that. It only made it worse. Long before she was a star, Janis was already struggling with substances, with alcohol, with pain. When she hit it big with Big Brother and the holding company, and later as a solo act, her use escalated, especially her dependency on heroin. Despite the success, Janis was lonely, full of doubt. The party life that once gave her power now left her empty. She tried to quit. She went back to Texas. She tried to get clean. But the pull of music and the high that came with it was too strong. She kept falling back. In her final months, she was recording Pearl, the best album of her life. Friends were hopeful. Certainly. Here's the full long-form, uninterrupted, emotionally rich, exposed-style documentary narrative based on your draft, polished, expanded, and elevated in tone while preserving every key theme and emotional note. Vulnerability became Janis Joplin's signature, not just a trait, but a cry from the depths of her soul. That's what made people connect with her so deeply. Every time she sang, the world could hear that fragile hope for love tangled with the bitter sting of rejection. She sang for every soul that had ever felt unwanted, unloved, or forgotten. Behind the loud music, the fur coats, and the electric performances, Janis was still that Texas girl, the one who had always dreamed of being loved, of being held, of being accepted. But tragically, she never truly believed she deserved it. And in every lyric, in every scream, in every whispered note, that longing echoed, making her music heartbreakingly real and profoundly, beautifully human. But fame wasn't the escape Janis thought it would be. In fact, it often deepened the sadness that had consumed her heart for so long. The blues queen, who carried far too much pain, found that the spotlight only illuminated her wounds. Long before she became a star, Janis struggled with substance use and alcohol, using them to numb the ache that had haunted her since childhood. When she rocketed to fame with Big Brother and the Holding Company, and later as a solo artist, her inner torment only grew darker and her dependence stronger. Her success didn't cure her. Instead, it gave her more access to the things that kept her numb. Despite standing before thousands, despite the roar of fans and the critical acclaim, Janice felt deeply alone. She was full of self-doubt, haunted by old scars. Friends who loved her watched helplessly as Janice, the woman who could captivate entire crowds with a single note, grew more and more isolated. The party life that had once made her feel empowered began to leave her feeling hollow. She tried. She really did. Janice made efforts to get sober, even going back home to Port Arthur, Texas, in a desperate attempt to flee the madness of San Francisco's chaotic scene. But the pull of the stage, of freedom, of substances that offered false peace, it was all too strong. She kept falling back into old patterns, as though something in her soul couldn't stop reaching for the very thing that hurt her most. In her final months, Janice was working on what would become her most acclaimed album, Pearl. Those close to her felt a spark of hope. Maybe this time, things would be different. Maybe this album would save her. Maybe she would finally believe she deserved to be happy. But behind the scenes, she had secretly returned to using heroin. On October 4th, 1970, just 16 days after the death of another musical icon, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin was found dead in her hotel room. She was 27 years old. But Janice was always more than just a tragic rock legend. She was smart, sensitive, raw, and wildly unique. She wielded a voice unlike any other, a voice that could shatter glass and still make you cry. And ironically, Pearl, the album she never lived to see completed, became her greatest masterpiece. With tracks like Me and Bobby McGee and Mercedes-Benz, Pearl captured the full spectrum of her being, her wit, her rage, her heartbreak, and her soul. It became one of rock's greatest records. Janis's voice was shaped by the deep well of blues music, particularly the emotional genius of Bessie Smith, the woman known as the Empress of the Blues. Growing up in a conservative Texas town, Janis was mocked and bullied for being different, for being too loud, too emotional, too wild. In Bessie's raw, unapologetic songs, Janis found refuge. She saw in Bessie a spiritual guide, someone who taught her it was not only okay to speak your pain out loud, but necessary. And when Janis discovered that Bessie Smith had been buried in an unmarked grave after dying in 1937, refused treatment by a whites-only hospital in a sickening display of racism, she was devastated. To her, this was more than an insult. It was injustice. It was the erasure of a woman who had meant everything to her. So Janis did something remarkable. In 1970, she helped pay for Bessie's gravestone, a small act with a massive heart. The inscription was simple but eternal. The greatest blues singer in the world will never stop singing. Janis used her fame to fight the silence that so often follows marginalized artists. She knew what it felt like to be ridiculed, ignored, cast aside. She refused to let that fate befall her idol. In honoring Bessie, Janis made sure the world remembered where her own voice came from and how that voice deserved to be immortalized. Because in the end, Janis Joplin gave everything to her music. Her life may have been short, but her impact was seismic. Her voice still pierces through time, reminding listeners of the beauty in being raw, real, and unafraid to break. But her story doesn't end there. It's time we unravel the lesser-known thread in Janis's narrative, the bitter tension and lifelong feud between her and another rock legend, Jim Morrison. You see, Janis Joplin wasn't some groupie clinging to the edges of rock stardom. She was a force. Fierce, complicated, and independent. But that strength had been hard-earned, built over years of being bullied, dismissed, and told she wasn't enough. So when she encountered someone like Morrison, reckless, arrogant, and privileged in ways she could never be, her guard went up.